householder retreat. There we go. Uh, so the fourth evening of the householder retreat. And it's interesting, householder retreat, just to name it as different than a retreat that you sit, 14 hours a day or whatever. This is where you live uh, your day. I do encourage, and I said this right at the beginning, of this is if you could sit in the morning, for 4 hours or something, not too long, just, but sit a little, and then try to follow through the day with, you know, uh, this ability to follow what we're doing. And so I'll just review here because it really starts with that. It's really what the bedrock of Buddhism is all about, which is that all things are impermanent. The word in Pali, anicca. And so, you'll never get this. It is always because the mind is always trying to, for its own protection, to kind of freeze your experience. And whether it's seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, thinking, it's always in process of adjusting and freezing it. But the problem is that the freezing of it doesn't take into account that it's constantly in flux, you know. And one of the beauties here is that if we begin to get the flux and the impermanence, then if everything is change, then why suffer? You know, you really don't need to suffer if it's all just change, you know? And yet, I wish to say that it's not how we do it. You know, we attach to things. They talk about the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, which keep us caught on the wheel, you know. And yet, the center of that wheel is that there is this impermanent process that is actually going on all the time. And so, in a way, to learn it and to understand it is considered one of the deepest insights of these practices. So that was the first night we were just talking about impermanence. The second night was about the body and how, you know, uh, this is yours this one time around. Uh, it is one of the greatest tools. The Buddha talked about how in this very fathom, which is like a 6 foot or something, 1 fathom body, is suffering, the cause of suffering, the release from suffering, and the path that leads to that, or what we know as the Four Noble Truths, are the sheer basis of an awakened body. And so I encourage you to, through your day, what's interesting about the body is that you can never put the same mind in the same body. It's always, it's always changing. So it may appear that it is something that is the same. It's not, you know. It's just this constant flux. And with that can come a sense of freedom, you know. We're not caught in it. And yet we can use it to awaken, you know. And So, what else about the body? It's always there, and you can ground your attention always in the present because the body always informs you about the present. The body's never in the past or the future. It's just your head, you know, your old noggin kind of thinking. And so here is this wonderful teacher that you have for this time around that actually has the capacity to um, uh, free you up, to awaken you, to keep you with the impermanence of always letting go. So it's incredibly valuable that way. And I couldn't really say enough about it. It's a very important part of our practice. Last night we ventured into um, opinions and views and ultimately judgments. And we create, uh, inhabit these views and opinions, and they become, in a sense, they almost become frozen in time. Um, and I understand that, that we all have basic histories, histories, which you can say is what is called cultural conditioning. Your family, uh, your school, all the things you went through growing up is all cultural conditioning. And that because of the cultural conditioning, we create these views. And these views then, in some sense, they kind of haunt us, um, because they usually are not necessarily true. Not saying they aren't necessarily true. And by being able to recognize the power uh, of these views and opinions and judgments, that we actually confine ourselves to a very actually small world. And I stepped into this last night. Now I'm going to step into it more tonight, and it is really about the dualism of the relative and the absolute, you know, and the absolute is completely free. There's never been a problem with it. And the relative is a mess, you know, and that's where we have to do a lot of our work. What I hope, with this practice is that you begin to learn that you have the ability to touch that absolute and let it inform the relative, the present, you know, and then you have a chance, you know. Otherwise, you're just another habitual creature that's caught on the wheel of, they say, samsara, and there really isn't any freedom there. There is just our likes and our dislikes, um, generating our judgments, actually, you know. So, so that's that. And but I want to go more into this, the kind of the relative and absolute. So tonight, I wanted to talk about identity, or there's another word I like is called selfing, you know, that we go around selfing, and that selfing is, I mean, in some ways, because it's part of the relative reality that we've all kind of, learned how to work with. And so, you have this identity, and that identity, you think, somehow defines you. And what's beautiful about these practices is that that's not what defines you, you know? It is not, uh, just your, past conditioning, and, it is, something, much bigger. And that's really where I come to in this is the relative and the absolute. And I do know because, I went through some pretty hard stuff when I was young, and, and I suffered a lot. And, it was really based on the relative truth that, I thought I could control, what's here, but I found out I could not control what's here, and, really put me on the path in some way. But I had to suffer quite a bit before I got that, you know? And then, once I kind of got it, then, this is a very interesting, kind of path in the sense that we have the relative and, we're all neurotic, okay? Don't think you're not neurotic. You're neurotic, and that's because of the past conditioning, and that you have bought it. And now you're at a place where you could start exchanging it somewhat with this idea of the absolute and the relative. And the relative is, when you're young, you have to make up a person. And actually, you create it out of, I guess it's karma. There's past stories about it, but it's really made out of nothing, you know. And we identify with that, and we take that as who we are, and we walk around with that. Sometimes it's a chip on your shoulder, and sometimes it's a beast, and sometimes it's a fearful, withdrawn. Uh, but it's all part of the relative personality. And Buddhism, it's not that you're going to, in some ways, you're not going to change your personality. You're going to free yourself from your personality. And so that really is the objective here. And so we have that absolute, which is really, it is the, uh, uh, when awareness no longer is caught within its sphere of the relative, and it actually is everything. And so, in a way, what we want to do is begin to, and really, these practices are more about the absolute than it is about the relative, because the relative, you know, psychotherapy works really good with that, and so do relationships and families and all that stuff. It's like, oh my God, it's thick with material. And so, but we have to have another means, and this other means has to do with our capacity for the absolute. And what is absolute? Oh, we use sometimes the word one, you know, but I think zero is better. But anyway, uh, but it's simply that we begin to uh, uh, associate more with the it's like the difference between a wide angle lens and a micro, you know. And the micro is very it's informative, and it is in relative terms who you are, um, you know, and it's almost invariably neurotic. And then there is also this, sometimes I like the word big, you know, we just kind of go for the big. And the big is, kind of incorporates everything else. And And we begin to train ourselves in our ability to release the relative and release the confinement of the present and realize that we're a lot more than that. You know, it's uh, it's a marvelous place to be born and have the chance to, first of all, we have to go through the relative. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. And it's really where that neurosis gets identified. And then we turn away from that. And it's really the practice here is can you, because you have to go through the relative to get to the absolute. But the absolute, it is that holds everything. And so there is great joy and pleasure in being able to, uh, first just identify. And I think sometimes, we think of it as, oh, the mind does that. It doesn't do it. It's the heart, you know, and the heart is the combination of the mind and body, this uh, mind, heart, body. And, um, and it carries the relative, but it also understands that it's much more than the relative. And it actually begins to, um, its views and opinions and judgments, it recognizes the nature of those things. Therefore, there is a releasing of the impermanence of the body, of the the opinions and views, and the quote unquote selfing that happens. And then suddenly you're looking through different eyes uh, at the uh, at the big, or at a world that it is no longer a world that's not safe. It's just a world, you know, and you have to have faith that it's pretty safe, and that we're in a pretty good place. You know, it's one thing I see in the West, and I don't know, when I'm in Thailand, so I feel very safe there. I think sometimes here there may be less safety. You know, um, but I don't know that. All I know is that for me, there's something about uh, that that so there is the relative, and we have to inhabit that. We have to kind of, in a sense, kind of create that self, and then you come here and you have to let go of that, because actually, from this point of view, it's a hindrance, you know, and maybe we can't let go of it. And so I like to and I use the term thinning out. So we begin to thin out the self. And so it doesn't become more cumbersome, but actually lightens up. And with that lightening up, then it's easier to touch that absolute, or that the ultimate, or whatever there are words for it that many different teachers use. But uh, it's no longer confined, and you have a chance to kind of be more than, or bigger than. And you find that when the mind uh, doesn't get caught, then there is an instinctual joy that exists. And it's not something that you made up. It's something that, because that big is there, it simply is the product uh, of a free heart and mind. You know, So I think that's good. So we'll turn to, this is always a challenge, the identity part, but we will move to questions. And I want to see where we go, where you go. I know where I'm going, but I don't know where you're going. So we want to start with the people in the room here, and then we will move to uh, the Zoomers, and we'll just see what happens here. It's last night it was more in the room than the Zoomers. So please, and just say your name, and you have to really speak into that mic closely.
Testing, testing. Yeah, really close.
Yeah,
My
unfortunately,
name's Gwen.
that's
That work.
yes, Gwen.
I didn't come last night, and I'm sorry I didn't because the topic is so interesting, values and opinions. I find a little question or conflict in myself because if there's an injustice or a wrong in the world, and that's my opinion, but I feel that it's a wrong and I want to right it, right? How do you, since you're so practiced, how do you deal with having an opinion and taking action on it, or but then you're kind of attached to the opinion?
Well, hopefully you don't get attached. And yes, there is, you can say, I would call it, enlightened action that is available. And, it basically, we have things like, we know what's right. We have these precepts of non-harming, and we know how much harm goes on out there. And so in some ways, yes, there is our capacity to mitigate somehow some of the damage that's going on. So, and that's really, you can say is um, an active Buddhist view of our that doesn't have to be, if you fixate on it and you get all locked up and you suffer, it's not a great thing, you know. But if you can simply hold it as, okay, this is what's true, and I'm working towards that, and then I think it's, to me, that's really somewhat maybe enlightened action that is necessary to, to bring the world into balance. Sometimes it's one person at a time, you know. So I think, this is not, you know, put your head, what is it, uh, the ostrich with its head in the sand, is we can see and we know, and therefore there is activity. Please, you have more of a
I
question.
have a bit of a follow-up. Where's the line? How do you determine between something that is an opinion and something that is the truth? I mean, I think my opinions are the truth.
I know that. And that's why in some ways we have to have the ability to reflect on what it is. And that, certain activity is certainly, there's a lot of injustice in the world. And there's also our capacity to serve, to help on some level. And I think that, you know, as householders, this is part of our truth, that we have to, you know, we are not, uh, you know, monks or nuns in caves. We're dealing with everyday life, and it's messy, and that we have to work with the mess, you know? But how do we work with the mess? That's the question. Is it something that we create more suffering for ourselves, or do we actually see it as a service and as something that, um, you know, we don't necessarily look for results, but we still are actively engaged?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if, excuse me, if anyone has a question in the virtual field. Oh, Carol has a question. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, I have a question. So I had a very unusual experience today. I found out that my kitty, who I just adore and is so much a part of my life, she has cancer. And I have all these uh, selves around that, the ones that love her, the ones that don't want to see her suffer, the ones that what's going to happen, the questions of, you know, how is it going to go down, right? And how these decisions that I'm going to have to make. And uh, so I was watching all these, this swirl of thoughts and opinions and worries, and but watching it, but staying on the surface of things, sort of staying on the surface of all of these, going through, noticing the impermanence of each thought. It would just, like, because I was on the surface, I guess they moved faster. And I was watching. And this was over a period of several hours. Well, the last, 5 or 6 hours it's been going on. And I guess my question is more like, staying on the surface is allowing me, I'm not going deep into any one of these thoughts. And it's allowing me to stay watching, but yet I'm wondering, I've never said that I shouldn't go deep into a thought or a self. I should, staying on the surface is not what I think is the right way to approach life. Is I'm trying to go deeper. That's what I'm working on, right? That's the whole point of it. So I'm asking for your thoughts on staying on the surface of things. Also, there's also the escape, the possibility of, well, I'll have a drink tonight and I'll just escape from all of these thoughts, and then I'll just be, relaxed and watch a movie. So where do you think I ought to land here? What's the best
Well, Carol, I think
approach?
first of all, I just, um, you know, it's part of the reality of life. And so there's a teaching going on about the cancer and the impermanence of your kitty and stuff. And so that's one side of it. And the other one is, what do you do with it? You know, that's the truth. That's what's going on. And I think the piece that's missing here is the heart, you know, because it's actually about touching the truth of, in this case, the impermanence of being and the vulnerability that is there. And you have to touch your heart for that. You can't think that, you know, if you think it just keeps swirling, you know. And if you want to get underneath it, you have to go to the heart. The heart, you know, is very interesting in the sense that when you have a question about life, you know, you probably aren't going to think it. You're going to, I don't know what the word is, your heart, you know, you have to bring your attention to your heart. And then that gives you, um, again, it goes from the heart to, if I can use it, because I've been using it, is the wider, the big, or the absolute, or some wider truth that exists, And so a lot of times we we worry and we get a lot of contraction, and we create a lot of view around it, and we just don't go under it. And so we stay on the surface, and that doesn't actually solve anything or resolve anything. And I think just turning the attention to the heart and, you know, just noting, we're such simple creatures, we just really want to be loved and we can love. And so there's that's the fundamental truth here. And the other is, I use this word papancha, the mental proliferation, which can be just a series of questions and keeps us on the surface and doesn't allow us to kind of touch what's underneath, you know. So it's a hard one, but it is how it works, you know. So but
All right, we have a question from the in-person audience.
This is Philip. I was going to ask you, what is the practice or how do we move from the relative to the absolute? But I think you just answered it for me, and that is live from our heart as much as we possibly can every moment of our awakened beings. And if we can do that, then we'll be there.
correct. Yes, Philip, you got it. This is, it's not brain science here. It is just simply how we change from the thinking to the heart. And then the heart can then allow us to open and kind of notice you could say the oneness or the emptiness of things, or the interconnectedness of things. There's many words for it, but that's what we're talking about, So, yes, I did answer it. You're welcome.
So is there anyone in the virtual world who has a question? Okay, we'll come back. How about in the meditation hall? Is there a question there?
I'm Vivian. So I'm going to bring it back to sort of practice because I'm new to this practice. So a lot of stuff is coming up for me. So I continued to practice experiencing how I merge with what's outside and then bringing my awareness, pulling it back through grounding in the body. And I continue to do that through today.
Perfect.
And
But
so, so one of the things I discovered, which I kind of have a question, but it's so new that I don't know if my question will be clear. So, is that I also was looking at judgment and all of that and this small sense of self, and I have very little small sense of self. And I discovered, so in my past, I was thinking, oh, that's a really spiritual place to be. But in actuality,
I've discovered that I'm really missing something. And let me see if I can. So because I merge so easily with wherever I am and who I'm with and what my experience is being, I haven't exercised the attention being drawn back except with my eyes closed. And so I feel like I've missed something. I don't know how to ask the question. I felt like, with coming what I see or what I hear, that was a cool experience or something spiritually. But every time I bring myself back to grounding in the body, it's as if I'm discovering something so much more real. It's like, this is unreal. It's like, I didn't know it till now. So I don't know how to ask the question.
You're asking the question because in essence, Vivian, some of us are mergers. We merge with whatever's there, and we kind of lose ourselves. And it's where this awareness of body, which is your primal place, you come back to. And so you don't really have any language for that at this point, but you are doing it. And every time you do it, it's like you get comfortable in your seat and in this body, and it has its own boundaries that way. That truth of, in a sense, we kind of, to merge, we abandon ourselves for that. And that's not what we're talking about here, even though that's one of the strategies that you learn very young and you carry with you. And you've survived, so you have this long, you've figured out how to work with that on some level, but there's a little more to it, and it's really this piece about, oh, how can I own myself, where it's an art where if I decide to merge, I merge. If I don't, if I see that there's really not any point in it, I don't. I just simply am walking around in my own skin, knowing it. And I have a choice. I can merge if I want, but not because I have the habit of it. And that's the difference. It's the habit of it. Like, oh, one of the beauties of merging is one of the fantasies of merging is that if I merge that way, I'll be loved. You got it? And in some ways it's proven to be true, but not true. And so learning to say, oh, can I just stay in myself, and then I can choose to merge, but I really am holding myself, because what is about merging is self-abandonment, and you may get a lot of kudos for the merging, but in the end, it doesn't work. It's and it's really why these practices are so essential for this culture, is that we begin to kind of own ourselves, and that awareness can choose whether it wants to merge or not. And there's nothing wrong with merging, but it is also, if it's self-abandonment, it's problematic, but if it's a choosing something because, you know, you really, it's wonderful to be able to be that open with someone. That's great, you know, or a situation. So hopefully that's helpful because boy, it's a that's a great question, and it's truly something that you know we all have to learn, and it's not sometimes an easy learning, uh, simply because we're just a series of habits, you know, and so you've learned strategies, and the strategies have worked up to a point, and this is saying, oh, maybe there's another level of the strategy that I haven't really inhabited yet, or I'm in the process of inhabiting now. So great. Thank you.
I'm very grateful.
Anyone in the virtual audience have a question? No. Back over to you in the meditation hall.
Kami.
Yeah, am I on? Okay. All right. So I want to go back to impermanence. And my practice as it is now is really just to stay, like you were guiding. And you know, I will hang out in the absolute, then I'll meander off, then I'll come back. And I've never really spent a lot of time looking at impermanence other than the obvious, like watching the beings that I love get older. So since you mentioned it, I've been maybe putting like one eye on impermanence or putting some focus on it. But I'm not other than putting some attention on it, I'm not sure how to uh, be with it, what to do with it, how to look at it.
Thank you. You know, this goes really deep, by the way, because the world we're living in is a transient experience. All things, even rocks and mountains, and it's all in that impermanent world, and that our learning from it is that there is the obvious insights, which you know, uh, getting old, you know, things coming and going, uh, things only have a certain amount of shelf life. Those are the physical parts of impermanence. But there's also the impermanence that they talk about as the deeper or deepest insights. And one of the fundamental insights of impermanence is that all things are empty of any inherent existence. You get that? Inherent existence. So that kind of emptiness is something that you're not going to penetrate so easily. You know, you kind of stand at the door of that for a long time, and but eventually, you know, you begin to inhabit it, and then you know it has this remarkable truth that that inherent emptiness is also fullness. Okay, you follow what I say there? It's so there's inherent emptiness, but there's also kind of deep in it is there's no separateness, so there is the fullness of it. And so And in Buddhism, we talk a lot about emptiness, but again, it's, it's just a word and term, but it also, to see into it, has consequences, you know. And the consequences are that if we can see into it, then suddenly uh, who we thought we were is not necessarily true. And you build up a whole personality about who you think you are. And, but from this point of view, no, you're just, you're just, you know, uh, you're a process, you know? And that's really what we go from, we all have relatively made up we're given these names and we live in those names and we create our whole identity and personality around those names. And eventually, this is where the practice goes, is that begin to dissolve the solidity of those things. And, uh, and then, uh, and then there's actual freedom, This is not something that, how to say this, uh, this doesn't just have intellectual consequences, it has physical consequences. And it's really why there's, schools of enlightenment, because enlightenment exists. And it actually, there are ways to get to it. And we're in that process of finding our ways to it, you know? And I mean, what else you doing? Really, you know, I couldn't find anything else. The main thing that mattered, But, this is again, um, insight, you know, uh, into it goes to emptiness. And then from the relative kind of permanence of things. And then, um, there is consequences, there's a moment of awakening that happens. And what is that looking at? Oh, that's looking at the dissolving of all things, the impermanent phenomena, you know, and actually that affects the neurosis, that you have, uh, uh, you have made, you got a lot inherited there, but you make this, and then you also free yourself from it, you know. So well, pass it there because Marie wanted to. Okay, someone has their hand up. I can't. I'm trying to see.
I don't see anyone online
Okay,
with their hand up.
then we'll go to Marie.
Can you hear me?
You have to speak up.
Marie,
That
okay.
mic's kind of wussy.
I have several questions, but I'm gonna try to stay focused. Because now I appreciate your question. When I was hearing consequences, my initial reaction, I always think of negative, like the negative
Ah.
consequence. So I was listening very closely to that. And what does make sense is with dissolving, when looking and investigating into impermanence, I can see the dissolving of identity. And when you mention neurosis, I'm thinking of the ego trying to hold on for dear life.
I want to be
Um,
me, but who's me?
And and there's where I do see consequences, like the bumpy ride of it, or like because initially my question was going to be about the challenge of embodiment, mind staying with body. Quite a challenge, and the best I can do with that is more attempts of pausing
Of what?
throughout the
Pause.
day
Yeah, great.
to just check in with how I'm breathing, to check in with my posture, and where I might be holding or tension. But that feels like the best I can do with that. If I'm besides sitting, meditating, and doing yogas, where I usually feel that more, but just throughout the day, it's challenging to
Remember
and
and to
to
pause.
feel to really understand what it means to be embodied in my body. And when you mentioned heart tonight too, I was not so much the physical heart, but it's about feeling more,
Mm.
right? Just allowing more, dropping out of the mind and feeling.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
sorry, I don't have a question. I just am clarifying.
Well, yeah, but a lot of times, sometimes when we talk about something, we're actually clarifying it for ourselves. So it doesn't have to be a question that way. It may just be a clarification in the experience of speaking about it. And uh, I think there's a problem. Uh, uh, as we go along here, then that ability, and this is about householder, is that ability to pause. But you have to remember, and it's also we are creatures of habit. So if you begin that process of pausing and you actually stick with it, then you're going to change yourself, because suddenly you're not just the same reactions. You're actually having some insight into um, the um, the fact that you're not here a lot of the time. You're often, I don't know, where do you go? You know, you know, somewhere, and then you remember and you come back, and in that moment, and this is where the body is so great, is you come back and you touch into the body for a moment, and suddenly, uh, things make sense. It's like, oh, wait, I'm here. Where was I before? That's a question. And so, so much of this is about remembering.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Marie.
Stick it up.
I know, I know. I'm sorry that. Uh, see, you have a question? Excuse me? Okay. Well, let's but you have to hold that thing up. Now, don't put it in your nose, but,
Q-tip for your nose. Um,
and then we'll do that. We'll go a little later. That's okay.
I was just thinking today, it's like thinking, we're always thinking, our mind goes here and there. But, there's certain things that like wake us up to the moment, like, for example, this morning I look out and there's all these flowers growing outside. I was like, oh, this is a magical moment. This is the time to, I can't remember what it was I said, to smell the flowers, to to be present with the flowers, to flower gaze. It's time to flower gaze. But what are those things that wake us up to the moment to, jog us back into the present moment, like throughout our days? And I just was thinking about that. And, is it like the wind, like gently on your face? It's like, oh, that's a wake up moment. What are those wake up moments for us? Just
Well, there can be constant moments of waking up, but then there is the habit of not waking up. And so then we need a little, it's like your spring flowers, and suddenly we see the beauty or whatever it is that then kind of brings us back into balance and embodiment, you know. So it's great. We'll keep it up. So we're going to do a little metta here. And so just take a moment to kind of feel your heart. And thank you for your questions and comments. And just attend to the heart. And you can just breathe into the heart. And it is this lining up of the mind and heart and body so that a lot of our answers come from the heart. They don't come from our mind. Our mind engages with it, but it doesn't actually answer. So there is this truth about the wonder of the heart. And so I have my phrases, may I live with an open heart. May I live with an open heart. May whatever covers my heart be dissolved. May whatever covers my heart be dissolved. And then just feeling the heart in its simplicity of just holding, in some ways you could say it's holding time. It's holding all the different selves that we have created. The heart holds that. And that we can extend some loving kindness to ourselves so that maybe there's a richness there where we don't abandon ourselves, but actually encourage our abilities to, find this middle way between the merging with things and our awakened self. As we hold ourselves in esteem and in loving kindness, we extend out to the community, the Sangha who are Zooming and those in the room, that this wish that may you be happy and peaceful. May you be healthy in body and in heart and mind. May you have ease of being. May you have the things you need: shelter, food, medicine, friendship. So ultimately, as a community, we can live in peace. And then we can extend that interest, that loving kindness beyond the confines of each of your homes on Zoom or place that you are, and also from this room out in all directions. And we extend this wish that beings may find peace and ease, and that there may have shelter and food and friendship and medicine so that beings everywhere can experience this truth of goodness. And again, if there's any merit or power or energy that's created through our coming together, we extend it out to beings everywhere that they may benefit from our practice. May all beings everywhere be happy. So I'm sorry I kept you a little longer tonight, but I think it's okay. You know, we had important things to talk about. Please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, dear friends, in this lovely Buddhist